Hello, everybody. Welcome along to another free webinar that we're producing here at the Dyslexia Association. This one is called Dyslexia and Self-esteem, and it's aimed at our young people with dyslexia. My name is Mary Scully. I have been with the Dyslexia Association about 5 or 6 years now, and I'm the service coordinator here with us. I'm joined today by Aoife Anderson, who is our information officer, and Aoife will introduce herself there in a moment, and she's going to take us through the slides today. If at any point you have a question, once you've had a look through the video today, you can contact us at info@dyslexia.ie or give us a phone call to our main line, and we'd be more than happy to support you in any way that you want. Okay, so I'll hand over to you there, Aoife, to kick us off. Thanks so much.
So thanks for the introduction. So my own name is Aoife Anderson. I'm one of the information officers here at the DAI. So very commonly like that, if queries come in via the phone, email, social media, we get contacted via a number of routes, but we're there to support you on the other side of the phone or email, because we understand the nuance of those cases and are here for support and guidance. So today we'll be looking a little bit on the dyslexia and self-esteem topic, which, there's a number of resources and supports out there to support our young people with dyslexia, but we understand that self-esteem is one of the most important aspects that we're looking to support our young people with as they progress through life and into adulthood. So an overview of what we'll discuss today, we'll be looking at what dyslexia is, and this will be really, really important when we are having those conversations with our young people in terms of self-esteem. We'll look at the ways in which dyslexia impacts self-esteem as well. We'll be looking at ways in which we can support the child, not the label. We'll be looking at self-esteem cycles, the language of positive reinforcement, building confidence when faced with stress and anxiety, and the importance of one good adult. So really looking at, the role models we can be within the space and how we can support our young people's well-being. So to begin with, looking at dyslexia. So dyslexia comes from two Greek words, dys and lexia. So dys meaning a difficulty, pain or trouble, and lexia meaning language or words. So coming together, dyslexia really at its core components there is a difficulty with language. And that's as simple as it is, in terms of when we guide those conversations with our young people, and dyslexia can exist in so many aspects of our life. It really comes down to those core components. So alongside that, it's really important to understand that as humans, we're not hardwired for sound and not for print. So really, fundamentally, as we grow, from young people, like as babies into toddlers, into children within the education system and onwards, our language will be something that comes to us that bit naturally, and we're hardwired for it. So we would say that 100 to 250,000 years, as long as we've lived as humans, that's really been our mode of communication. So unless there's a problem, it emerges spontaneously and effortlessly. Written language, reading, writing, is a young skill. So it's only a few thousand years old. We're not hardwired for it, and it requires to be taught. And especially with this teaching component and understanding that we know dyslexia is that difficulty with sounds or words, but this is where that component of dyslexia will be indicated within schooling and when we're being taught our language. So what dyslexia can look like is that it can look like a difficulty with reading. It can look like a difficulty with phonics or sounds. It can be a challenge within the area of writing, auditory processing, and alongside that, speech and language processing automaticity. So that flow of how naturally it's coming to us, alongside something like working memory, which is another core component of dyslexia. It can also look like a difficulty acquiring age-appropriate reading, writing, and spelling. It can look like it occurs on a spectrum. So we can go from mild to severe. And we're really huge advocates of, if you know one person with dyslexia, you know one person with dyslexia. So it mean very different things for different people. So we can't, assume that the challenge exists in all of these areas of reading, writing, spelling, working memory for everybody. It will have its nuance for individual to individual. And it's really helpful to know as well that dyslexia is hereditary and it has a neurological basis. So it's quite common for dyslexia to run in families as well. And that's quite commonly the case as well in some cases, should I say, when people come forward for assessments as well. There might be an uncle, a sibling, another family member who also has dyslexia. And most importantly here, dyslexia is lifelong and there's no cure. So working with it and managing your dyslexia is really, really important. And we would say that the early identification of dyslexia helps a young person to develop an understanding of their profile and work from there. Perfect. So in terms of what dyslexia means, for some children, it means that they struggle to read fluently, and that's something that might be caught upon, early within schooling or at home indeed as well. As well as remembering and recalling what they have read. So that comprehension and that understanding can be a clear indicator as well. For some, it will mean finding it really hard to sound out words in their heads when they're trying to spell. So that kind of automaticity of those coming together. But going back as well, we have to understand it's actually quite a difficult language. English, has a number of words and sounds that come together that look different but have the same sound. So a young person can have challenges with that. There's a certain component of that would be natural, and there'd be a challenge there. And then alongside those other factors, we'll get an indication if there's dyslexia there and the understanding of how to support that. And for some, it'll mean the sustained effort of deciphering reading makes them too tired to do much else. So those comprehension questions, dragging out from a piece of text what's being asked of them. And for some, it might mean being forgetful and a little bit disorganized as well. And that comes down to that short-term working memory. For some, it can be a difficulty organizing their thoughts on paper. And oral language is much better than what your children can write. So that the discrepancy by which they're much more comfortable sharing information verbally than they would inputting on paper. And some pupils will experience a difficulty with rote learning, and some experience a difficulty with other languages. So within the Irish school system, some might have that challenge with Irish, and in progressing into secondary school, we might see it with modern foreign languages as well. But most importantly, we have to acknowledge what dyslexia is not. It's not a disease. It's not a life sentence. It's not a foregone conclusion that your child will never learn to read, and it's not an excuse to give up easily and not try. So we can absolutely acknowledge the challenging days and the effort that's going in there, but it doesn't mean that we give up. And it's not what you choose for your child, and it's not an easy ride through education by any means. For some children, it makes them more determined and self-motivated. Some become excellent leaders due to their ability to delegate tasks. Some may have an ability to problem solve in a way that's different to their peers, and helping them to think in a creative and a unique way. And that kind of reflects that point as well. We would say, like, for a dyslexic brain, rather than going from A to B, sometimes they take the scenic route, and there's so much more that we can see through that space and that kind of creative thinking that comes with it. And some children become more self-aware and better able to learn and assimilate information, and that comes through their strength of problem solving as well. But and the but here is, with the right help, support, understanding and determination, dyslexia is something that can be remediated and overcome either through specific accommodations, personal strategies, and most importantly, hard work. So those components together, in growing an understanding of supporting our young people's educational needs alongside their well-being, it is really what will foster and bolster their support as they progress through life.
And we have that saying, don't we, on our website? How does it go? It's mighty or it's no disgrace to be poor, but it's mighty inconvenient. It's the same for dyslexia. There's no disgrace in having dyslexia, but it is mighty inconvenient. We do just have to work that little bit harder. Some parents watching this video today might see some elements of their young person in those things that you described of what dyslexia is and what dyslexia is not. As you said, there's no one size fits all. Dyslexia is very, very unique, as we're all very unique individuals, humans. So there'll be elements that we see and there'll be elements that we don't see that we can reflect upon. But it's good to have a full picture of what dyslexia can look like. And yeah, it's no disgrace to have it, but it is mighty inconvenient, but we'll overcome it for sure. Yeah. Thanks for that, Aoife.
No worries. So what I'll do is I'll dive into looking at what self-esteem is for first. And it's really helpful, and what we tried to cover there is that understanding and breaking down what dyslexia is and what it isn't, because it will really guide these conversations when we are trying to support our young person's understanding of themselves as well. So self-esteem is the judgment or opinion we hold about ourselves. It's the extent to which we perceive ourselves to be worthwhile and capable human beings. Self-esteem is the picture we have ourselves. So all those facets that make up our personalities, our traits, and that will all feed into our self-esteem. And self-esteem is made up of our experiences and our relationships in our lives. Everyone we've ever met has added or taken away from how we see ourselves. And that's really important as well in considering around a young person who may have difficulties and challenges within school impacted by their dyslexia, to be supported and to see their strengths in other ways is really, really important. But signs that we can see with low self-esteem, maybe things like exaggerated bragging. There might be attention-seeking behaviours both at home and in a school space. We might see things like signs of complaining, verbal and physical aggression, but also we can see that intuitively some young people might be trying to opt out of the space because they might not feel that a specific lesson or task that they're set is working to their strengths. And these are all factors that we can take into consideration.
And this is why we would say, isn't it, Aoife, sorry to interrupt you, that the identification of dyslexia is so important in our young people, because without the identification of dyslexia, our young people know that they're working at a different speed to their peers in classroom, and they don't want to be different. Nobody wants to be different at a young age. We all just want to follow the crowd and get on and with everybody. And our young people definitely know that there is something that they're that they need support with in school. So there's no point in not talking about it. There's no point not identifying it. And the lack of identification can really cause those low self-esteem issues, couldn't they, Aoife?
Yeah, absolutely. And you might see those aspects here. So it's when we might spot things like blaming or self-critical, always apologizing, these sorts of things, to pause and acknowledge where it might be impacted by their own general well-being, but also by their dyslexia and the context in which they work within school. So it's always worth being aware of those spaces and also having those open conversations with other guardians, siblings, teachers around that, and getting to understand that with the young person as well, and creating that dialogue. So in terms of ways in which we can nurture self-esteem and foster it, is looking for a couple of things in which we're going to build it up on. And these are like a sense of security, a feeling of trust and safety. And that safe landing space is usually, their home, when they come home and they have that safe landing space with their family. A sense of selfhood, knowing who you really are. So dyslexia being just one component of that. There's so much beyond that in terms of being a good sibling, a good friend, really talented at art, dancing, whatever it might be that, that they take that interest in and builds up their sense of self. A sense of affiliation and belonging. So in their school community, in their family community, and they're accepted for who they are. A sense of mission, a feeling of purpose, direction, and responsibility. And we'll discuss it in the video as well in terms of the different areas that we can support that, and setting realistic goals and targets to help with their frame of mind. And a sense of competence, feeling like you're capable and successful in the things you do. So knowing that your best is good enough, and that you can feel rewarded for that as well, in terms of the praise you can receive, from friends, family, teachers, but also yourself, that you feel that pride in what you've achieved. So it's really important to understand as well that dyslexia will mean very different things to a young person at different stages of their life. So what it would mean for a 7-year-old would mean a very different thing to a 17-year-old in terms of their identity, and with that as well, the resources and supports that they lean into. So they might want that support at the kitchen table, age 7, and it can be of huge help. And then age 17, they don't want to know about it. So it's really leaning into what's of help to you. Let me know. And they'll discover their own learning pathways in terms of the ways that they like to revise or study, or prepare for a test on a Friday. And there's multiple means in which we can try and make that an enjoyable piece, because at the end of the day, learning should be an enjoyable thing, and that everybody has access to it. So growing and learning with your dyslexia, so it's just a part of who you are, and finding the language and supports that are appropriate, as you said, at those different stages, and knowing that even within a couple of months, or you might look across a year, that will change. So working in that kind of dynamic relationship with your young person in the supports that they receive. So alongside that, in terms of discussing dyslexia with your young person, and we can see this especially in coming out of spaces of a dyslexia assessment, or conversations might be being had in school, we would be huge advocates to say that discussing dyslexia with your young person is of huge importance. So for the most part, and I know Mary, like we're always seeing it within the parents courses as well, your young person will probably have an indication that something different is there, in terms of the energy that they're putting into their work, in terms of different elements of frustration. And it can actually be of huge relief for them to understand, that dyslexia is a component of who they are. It might help in terms of that reasoning and understanding for them as well. So explaining that dyslexia is very common, and several other people in the school, and maybe even others in the class or family, will have it. And we also have loads of famous dyslexia role models as well. So you really want to lean into that. And even if you're on a bus, we would say 10% of the population will have dyslexia, ranging from mild to severe. So if you're on a bus with 30 other people, there's a very high likelihood that you're not on the bus alone with dyslexia. There's probably other people there with it. So it's not something you're experiencing in isolation. We're absolutely learning more about it every day, and the supports and resources that can be provided, but not feeling that that's something that you're going through alone is really, really important, and can be explored with your young person. You can tell your young person that dyslexia is just a big word to explain why some people find it hard to learn to read, write, and spell, and that everybody is different. And there's some fantastic videos out there. The British Dyslexia Association have some fantastic work in terms of everybody learning differently, and our brains being just like our eye color. Everybody's eye color and hair color and personalities are different. Everybody's brain is slightly different, and will process at a different level in terms of reading, writing, spelling. But it's the conversation in terms of intelligence. Dyslexia is completely different to intelligence. It's looking at specifically that challenge around reading, writing, spelling for some individuals, and that will vary at different levels as well.
And maybe just to step it back a tiny bit as well, Aoife, just in relation to, I know like parents would ask us all the time in relation to maybe bringing their young person for an assessment, how would you suggest that the parent verbalizes to the young person that they're going to come in and meet a psychologist, meet a lady or a man, whoever's doing the assessment. And how would you describe that to a young person?
And it's definitely in the mind of a parent and guardian as that date approaches, and setting up the assessment. The main thing is, explaining that, whether it's that particular day that they won't be in school, that they're going to, go to get the support of somebody who understands and their ways of learning, and we're trying to get a bit more information so that it's not a test. They take things at their own speed, and that their best is good enough in terms of that space. So it's really guiding in conversation that this will be a session to find out more about their learning styles and the way that they process information. And again, the conversation will differ depending on age. Some young people, giving them the bare bones and being able to have the discussion afterwards with say, a young adult in secondary school, it's having the open conversation around going forward for a dyslexia assessment, knowing a little bit maybe about what dyslexia is. And most importantly, I think, Marion, I don't know if you'd agree, is that you're explaining that it's not a test. It's not there that they have to perform to a certain level. It's they're going in to look at their ways of learning, and that's what's being explored to come out with, better supports and resources. No,
that's perfect. Thanks for that, Aoife.
No worries. And finding the routes to allow them to work to their strengths is really, really important. So another really important aspect here when we're discussing dyslexia is, our patterns of thought, and a very common one that we'll come across with young people through, their development will be something like learned helplessness. So this will start from feeling that sense of failure in terms of their academic ability. And when you're met with that challenge, in which, say, being set up for something like a spelling test on a Friday, in which a young person knows that this isn't their strength, they know that it's something that they have a challenge with, but it's a repetitive thing that they'll be told to go in and do every Friday. So that can really be discouraging for a young person and set up that feeling of the sense of failure, in which they know on a kind of a continuous basis that it will be a challenge. And this can result in things of lack of effort, but also a work avoidance as well. So we can see common conversations happening on the phone in terms of the school bag going missing, or there might be that avoidance to the work, specifically because they know it's not working to their strengths, and there's many other things that they'd enjoy doing with that work to their strengths in better areas, and that can result in that area of low achievement. And most importantly there, like that negative attitude and that reflection they would have on their self. So breaking that kind of learned helplessness cycle is extremely important, not only for their own well-being and their understanding of themselves, but also, in fostering resilience, because dyslexia will present a challenge in a number of areas of school. As we said, it can impact areas like spelling, reading, writing, working memory. So it's really important that, there's ways that they, can pave out those ways that work for them in terms of working to their strengths, but also with that example specifically of the spelling test, is there a multisensory approach that we can take? Is there ways in which they can help navigate their ways of working out of this cycle of learned helplessness? And the negative self-esteem cycle, like we were saying, there is that low achievement, low perception of self and others, and it can impact relationships as well. So, the difficulty and, emotions of a young person experiencing that negative self-esteem cycle, it affects a family as well. There's a dynamic there in which everybody's going to try and be supporting and lifting somebody's, self-image. So it's really important to be able to disrupt that. And what we're looking to do is from that element of introducing that positive self-talk. So in those moments where a young person, might be stating, I can't do it, this isn't for me, I'm stupid, which we're all words that we're all very familiar with, or young people with dyslexia using. it's disrupting that to say, actually, you're not. And we're going to address this moment of time what dyslexia is, and we're going to keep reinforcing it. And that's really important in terms of opportunities for success. So in those moments where you can disrupt that cycle of thought for them, it's bringing in all the other elements of their personality that make up who they are. Especially if they're focusing on those specific things that they don't think they're good at, or that they feel their peers, for example, are very strong at. So you're helping in terms of that positive perception of self and others, those rewarding relationships as well, so that it isn't a fight at the kitchen table, and that there can be that positive language used. And it's not to say, the ideal scenario, a young person will go through flux of a low self-esteem cycle and high self-esteem cycles throughout their life. So it's really important, that they have those junctures in which they'll be supported if you're recognizing it, and it might be a pattern of behavior. And you're looking to improve that self-confidence, and it does begin with the conversation they have and the words that they use to describe themselves or how they're feeling. And in terms of this, Mary, as well, it's one of the most important aspects, isn't it? When the conversation comes up, and they're, you can see in their own sense of self, they're feeling quite low, and this might be pointed out by a teacher, youth worker, anybody who's working closely with your young person.
So, and it could be as simple as the parent being, or the guardian, you can do it, it. Those simple words, and then eventually getting them to say, I can do it, I can do it, and repeating that over to yourself. Those self-affirmations, that positive self-talk is so important. And it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. We don't have to, we don't have to be Wordsworth or anything like that now in these things. We just need to believe it and say it repeatedly, and eventually we'll catch on to it. It's a slow roll. We plant a little seedling and it grows into a mighty oak. So it's all that really soft, gentle, constant, affirmations that you can do it, I can do it, and we will get there. So it's so important. Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about, it's not that immediate shift around. Sometimes it's, a change in the supports and resources that are being provided to tailor to the young person's needs, in terms of what they're having difficulty with and what can be supported in terms of the areas of learning, homework, whatever it might be. So really important around this is in terms of building confidence, that tasks are seen as valuable and achievable. And again, this will not happen in every sphere that a young person says, I realize the value of my homework. I understand the importance of tucking into those 2-hour study, but that they see the results in terms of them putting in the effort, that they see that with their own pathways and their own ways of learning, applying that and understanding that is so important, that they feel actually, I can see that improvement. And that, I think it's referenced here as well, but we're not looking for shifts in major grades. We're just looking to put in our best effort, and being able to communicate if there's that difficulty or more support is needed. And there's many people in their lives that a young person can dip into to receive that support. And it reflects this point as well in terms of contingent praise as being equal to effort, as important as output. So if you put in those 2 hours and you take your breaks, you get your movement breaks in there, you're able to get out for a walk or whatever amongst your work for an evening, that it's just as important because you've tried, and that can be acknowledged in that cycle of discussing with teachers as well, if that query of where they're at is, or how much effort they're putting in, and making that differentiated approach to their learning can be supported in acknowledging that as well. In terms of reframing negative statements, so the statements of I always get this wrong, I never can do that putting the question to them and saying, well, actually that's not true, because remember there was this test a couple of weeks ago and we tried this approach and it worked really well. Or it might be I can never remember where my bag is, and being like, okay, well, what might be able to help that? Or is there a system we could set up in which it's at the door? Would you like me to give you that reminder? And again, these will mean different things at different stages, and the certain amount of independence that will grow with it as well. but reframing, because sometimes when you meet the negative with the extreme positive, it doesn't go down so well either. So it's posing the question and getting them to consider where they're at with it.
And it's a good point in that one as well, if I might just jump in there to say that we could be having a bad day. We could be having a low energy day where I have misplaced my bag, or, you know, I always feel like I'm getting this wrong. You're not always getting it wrong. You're just having a low energy day. You're just, you know, you've had a lot going on today. You might have gotten into bed half an hour later last night because we were out visiting Granny or whatever. Do you know, there's so many circumstances that go on, and it's to know and to be, you know, to be confident in ourselves as parents and as our young people, to know that, okay, today is just a blip, and tomorrow or the next day, you know, I'll come out of it. I'll be back to my usual self, you know, and it's understanding that don't beat yourself up over that blip. You know, you just have to accept it and move on with it.
Exactly. And I think that's so important, Mary, as well, in terms of in a busy life in which there's many things that have to be done during a day, in an evening. It's really difficult to do that zooming out, but that zooming out is of huge importance because your young person understands the whole picture. Do you know, the energy that they put in that day is really valuable, and that might be impacting their energy, or, you know, a late night, or like you were saying, that there might be other plans built into the day which have taken from them, in which putting their you know, pen to paper at the end of the day, or, you know, working on schoolwork specifically, or other aspects, you know, that dyslexia might be, you know, presenting as a challenge within their day-to-day life. So zooming out and asking those questions when you're met with that negative statement can be really helpful. Aim is realistic, so self-belief in own abilities, so in their own competency, is really important. Optimistic realism, or realistic optimism, is an important point there. Alongside, like you were saying, Mary, acknowledging the difficult days, because this is a journey in terms of building confidence, and like that, it's a progressive piece that people are going to be working on their whole lives. So, you know, you're really providing the foundations really of that kind of very mindful, conscious and aware of where they're at, how they're loved, how they're being supported, and thinking of the bigger picture as well. Super. So in terms of what we want for young people, we want them to know what dyslexia is, alongside what it very much isn't. So demystifying from what a dyslexic, it doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you're, you know, all the negative words we can see that come out, that it's a disease or anything like that. You know, we're really trying to bring out that understanding that it's just a different way of learning, and you will be navigating that the whole time. And, you know, as a parent guardian, you're not expected to have all the answers of what the best solutions are or anything like that. So navigating with them that their best is good enough, and how to ask for help and resources when they need them. So especially if they're getting extremely frustrated on, you know, specific tasks or pieces of work or reading, whatever it may be, that you can say, actually, is there anything I can do? Is there a conversation we can have with the school, you know, within a secondary school space? Do you think you'd be able to ask about, you know, those the homework being taken down prior to class, or if you have another way of accessing that? So there's always ways in which you can lean into asking for help, and it's not a weakness to be able to lean into that as well. So especially in considering when we're talking here about where a young person is at, in terms of managing and working with their well-being, it's really important to know those indicators of stress and anxiety, because again, these will come up across any young person's life, but how we can support them with it. But being aware of the indicators absolutely can be really helpful. So a young person who's stressed may have angry outbursts. They might have you know, that avoidance to certain tasks, a lack of confidence within themselves. Again, are all indicators that stress could be happening within one space or another. Anxiety being that state of worry of what might be. So again, in that flux of what do I know to expect from tomorrow's, you know, lessons? What can I expect, you know, of the weekend if I'm out with my friends, and, you know, we're doing something in which I feel like my dyslexia might, you know, highlight or be very visible to other people. So that anxiety is a natural piece. Everybody will have a certain level of anxiety, but it's seeing in where it's manifesting or helping a young person understand what it is, and again being kind of solution focused and receiving that support. So both of these emotions can be present in a young person with dyslexia, and approaching and responding to these emotions is really, really important. So again, when we spot things like anxious avoidance behaviors like school bag going missing, or physical illness or school avoidance, acknowledging that for what it is, meeting them where they're at, and trying to have that conversation. So if it's happening, being able to say, is there anything that might be making you feel this way, or is there anything we can support you? And dyslexia might be just one of the components of that as well. So it's fleshing out and getting them to articulate and understand for themselves, especially young children, of what they're feeling and what they feel that the solution might be. So sometimes it's always worth zooming out, like Mary was saying there, and being like, okay, what, especially with an anxious mind, what's the worst case scenario? Okay, the worst case scenario is that I go into school and I get in trouble because I'm not on the ball, or I'm not where I'm supposed to be at a certain task, and say, okay, well, if that's what you're worried about, how do we work down from that? Do you think that's actually the case? Or do you feel that, there's a conversation that can be had there to support you and bring about that understanding? And making sure that, their feelings are valid, and they can feel anxious and they can feel stressed, and working back from that. So they're really, grounding themselves in that understanding and breaking it down, and that they have those safe spaces to have those conversations. So if I'm feeling anxious, I could hide in my bedroom, but I could also be able to talk to somebody about it as well. And that frame of mind is so, so important as they grow up as well.
It's kind of like in a school setting, even wouldn't it be like the trifecta of the young person, the family at home, and the school? They all have to be singing from the same hymn sheet. So when our young person is experiencing those moments of anxiety or worry or stress or avoidance or illness or any of that caused by something in school, especially, we can definitely have the conversation as a parent. Okay, what can you do? What can I do? And what can school do? And it's getting all of those elements on a level playing field, so that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet and move forward with it, and knowing that their voice is a very strong voice in that movement forward. And it's pivotal. We can't happen without them, and it's giving them that time and space and energy to voice their concerns, to voice what they need, and us, the parents, the house, the guardian, being that soft landing spot, as you said earlier on. That's so, so important. And then getting school on side, that's the other element of it,
Yeah, and for that to be translated. So the singing off the same hymn sheet, and for there to be a clear understanding of the young person's frame of mind, where they're at, and that they're included within that conversation and they feel heard, is really good. So the language of possibility, so that's basically, if I know this is hard for you, I know that you're trying your best, I know you can't do this yet, but we'll get there. There's no expectations that we're going to be working on our own, frame of, our own time frame in terms of where we take things. So it's really important for that to be acknowledged. I'm going to help. You have so many people here that you can lean into. Don't feel like you're going through this alone. And we're going to do this together. So it's that collective effort, and they're supported by people within their lives. And that language of reassurance. So that really wonderful quote from Albert Einstein, in terms of everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So, when we look at the kind of more classical ways in which a young person would be tested for information in school, it will be in that format of, a written test within a structured time. And we know from conversations with young people that they have so much information that they want to share sometimes, but the difficulty is making sure that certain aspects of questions are answered on time in a test setting. And this absolutely will impact, confidence and self-esteem. But we can reassure that there's so many ways by which we can work to our strengths, that we can create that bigger conversation with the school. And like that, their academic journey through education is just one aspect of who they are. Their relationships with people, their kindness, there's so many other aspects to a person that are so valuable, and create that bigger picture as well, and ways that they can work to their strengths. Perfect. So problem solving, being able at those difficult moments or junctures to be able to identify what the problem is, and really trying to get to the root of it, whether it is that bit of anxiety, whether it's stress, whether it's tiredness from, a day of school in which, there might be certain challenges, coming up. Develop at least 5 possible solutions with your young person, being able to suss out what you see the pros and cons are, and picking a solution and testing them out. So like that, problem solving collectively, because we can't, say there can be so many conversations in a home in terms of, why do I have to do this? Because I told you so, because we have to, so being able to say, actually, what do we see as the problem with that task? How are we going to work around it? What could be some of the solutions, and then testing them out together, and like that, working in tandem, and letting them have a voice in terms of having, seeing themselves that they're creating a number of these solutions themselves as well. And in terms of other ways in which we can foster self-esteem, we're looking at forgiving ourselves for past mistakes, focusing on our positive attributes, focus on the example of positive, healthy people in our lives, that set that example. Exhibit the behavior you want your young person to take. So, that approach that we take in difficult scenarios, or, the kindness and compassion that we show other people in our lives. Practice your talents and learn new things. So it's okay to, try other things and lean into those areas that sometimes you might be fear of failure can exist with a young person. Every young person, but with a young person with dyslexia, if they are having specific challenges, or work is taking that bit more time. So it's definitely worth leaning into that as well, and allowing them to explore spaces by which they can develop new hobbies and areas of interest. And in terms of when we look at our young person as a whole, and a human as a whole, you're looking at their well-being. So feeling good about themselves, the world around them, and functioning well in everyday life most of the time. And I think that's one of the most important lines here. There's no right way to work your way around the world, or within a school day, or within, balancing the juggling act of day-to-day life. So knowing as a parent guardian as well that your best is good enough, and there won't be the perfect route or access route. There absolutely is a number of supports and resources that you can lean into in terms of supporting your young person with dyslexia, but you're really looking in terms of being resilient and coping with normal stresses of life is also important. So when those normal stressors come up, that there's an approach, and you have that kind of solution focused attitude. And like that, there's give, keep learning, be active, connect, and take notice. So I think this Mental Health Ireland have put it together, and all those assets that should exist on your day-to-day life. And the last kind of reflection we'll be looking at is looking at that one good adult, and that huge role and responsibility in terms of the single most common factor for a child who develops resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other child. So that was done through the Growing Up in Ireland survey in 2019. And it just shows, you are there for your young person. You're touching in, you're touching base, you're checking in with them, and you're supporting them through their journey, through their development. And it can't be underestimated in terms of that value that brings to the space, and the areas that it can impact in terms of increased self-esteem, less risk-taking behaviours, more likely to seek help and guidance, and better mental health. So again, all those aspects for our young person as a whole, the impact a good adult can make on their lives. And like that, if we're leaning into supporting them and fostering their resilience, it's having that unconditional positive regard. So you're never going to, get in trouble at home, or you're never going to for not, you know, getting 100% in a test, or, you know, not be flying through the library books at home. You taking things at your own pace will always see the very best in you. Looking towards joint problem solving so that you have the support there. Helping your young person develop that growth mindset, and again, that resilience that they have for themselves, fostering their strengths, giving them responsibilities that they can handle, again, that independence coming in there, and acknowledging both the negative and the positive internal voices. So really, you know, when we feel it comes up within our young person, that we can say, okay, I'm recognizing that. How can we facilitate conversation around it? And, you know, who else might be of benefit, you know, included in this conversation? Is it the class teacher? Do you know, are we going to have a bigger conversation as a family to be able to support their own, you know, thinking in terms of their own self-esteem and self-worth? And there's a number of different resources we have through ourselves in the Dyslexia Association, Team Dyslexia being just one of them, which is a resource provided through our membership. So Team Dyslexia was really designed to encourage families to explore and discuss experiences of dyslexia. So we're really looking to create those open spaces of conversation, because like that, we're breaking down those barriers in terms of understanding and you know, acknowledging the difficult and challenging days. And like we said, that there's no expectation to come in with all the answers and to be experts on dyslexia. Like, it's a learning journey, and exploring that as a family in that safe and brave space will be so important in developing understanding and resilience. And we do have Dyslexia and Me workshops. They're currently on pause as of 2021, but we're hoping in the new year to be able to have them back up and running. And what they are really is that peer-to-peer support workshops in which other young people with dyslexia are exploring it together. They're doing the myth busting, and that it's interactive, it's fun, and it's accessible. So, you know, being able to share alongside other people those common, you know, experiences and difficulties, but also aspects, you know, of their dyslexia that make up who they are. So it's a really wonderful space, and we can't wait to have them back up and running. But just included at the end here are a number of resources in terms of other aspects in which, you know, dyslexia again can impact a young person's self-esteem and well-being, but it's just one aspect of it. So at some stages, signposting and getting further guidance can be really helpful. So you can lean into areas like Jigsaw, Spun Out, A Lust for Life, Mental Health Ireland, and Big Life Journal for that kind of growth mindset work, especially with younger children, can be fantastic. And we'll leave you on this note in terms of every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they possibly can be. So like that, you know, we can always guide that conversation of connection with our young people and helping them to see all those possibilities. And sometimes, you know, having that adult in your life that's guiding you with that and giving you that positive language can never ever be underestimated. So super. Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks so much for that. You covered a lot of ground there today. We really hope that everybody tuning into this finds it super helpful, because definitely it's meant to be a tool in the toolkit in supporting a young person through their journey with their dyslexia. And I'll just repeat what we had said at the top of this as well, that you can get in touch with us on info@dyslexia.ie if you have any questions, and do keep up to date with our mailings through our membership and linking with our social medias as well. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.